Let's return now to the politics of the day. Joining me, our regular panel, former Victorian Liberal Party President Michael Kroger and former Labor Minister Stephen Conroy. Gentlemen, it's great to see you both. Stephen, it must be so frustrating for Anthony Albanese. The government's been on the back foot day in, day out, and then just now an absolute gift for them on the final sitting week of the fortnight.
Look, I think Albo will sleep easy tonight. Joel Fitzgibbon, the alleged ringleader, was the first member of the New South Wales right to put up his hand and say, let's all vote for Anthony Albanese, the leader of the New South Wales left. And Joel has very much been in that camp all along. This is a dinner that people come to. I've been to millions of dinners like this. They are harmless, but in terms of the issue that Joel is representing, I mean, he had a nearly 20% swing to One Nation in his seat. He is standing up for his constituents. He is standing up for a policy position. And there's a robust debate taking place about the best way for Labor to go forward on climate change. They would be crazy, absolutely crazy, if they decided to put a policy out any time in the next 12 months. They've got to work through a lot of issues. There's a lot of movement happening around the world. And Australia shouldn't, and the Labor Party shouldn't, be forecasting its position until it knows more facts. So I don't think Albo has anything to worry about.
Yeah, no, that's some valid points, obviously, Stephen, but I guess it's the timing, Michael. You know, as Peter Dutton pointed out, the Deirdre Chambers moment. Oh, goodness me, there's a camera. PVO's here with a camera out the front of the restaurant, and we've got our grabs ready to go. The makeup's on. Don Farrell seemed like he was pretty prepared there, Michael Kroger.
Yeah, that PVO gets around a bit, doesn't he? Well, look, in a bizarre way, I agree with Stephen, because what this says to the public, particularly the voters in Queensland and Western Australia, that Albanese has to win the election, is that there are people within our ranks, loud and influential people within our ranks, like Fitzgibbon and that fellow Farrell from South Australia, who I must say I rate very highly as a political operative. It says to the voting public, Albanese might be hard left, but we have a very large block of people in our ranks, a lot of ex-Shorten people like Shane Newman, but we have a large number of influential people within our ranks who are going to stand up for traditional Australian industries. Now, in terms of Labor's reputation within those electorates that they have to win, that can actually only be good news. If Albanese sticks with the previous emissions targets that Shorten has, that's an attack on the coal industry. He'll get the same result as he got in 2019. So this group, which is a fetter on the more extreme views of Shorten, is probably a very good thing for Labor politically.
What are your thoughts on that, Stephen? Because it's interesting to have a robust debate is one thing. I guess the annoyance of losing a day in Parliament, that passes. But isn't it better to be having these in a more coordinated fashion? We'll get to the Nationals in a moment, because that's a whole different kettle of fish, Stephen. But
no,
isn't it better to be having these robust discussions coordinated?
Yeah, no one's leaving the caucus. People are rightfully raising issues inside the party room. They're rightfully raising issues inside the various meetings that they go to say that we've got to have a more balanced policy than we had going into the last election. And that is, as Michael has said, that is actually a sensible discussion to be having. So yes, I'm sure it was embarrassing. I mean, I've heard rumours, I've talked to people and said, oh no, look, someone put the wrong name on a email list, and it's been going to a member of the National Party staff because they've got the same name. Yeah, embarrassing, but in terms of substance, the policy debate is a substantive issue that the Labor Party needs to have. We can't go into the next election, as Michael has rightly pointed out, and have the same policy or a harsher policy, which would be the natural consequence of 3 more years of inaction by the Morrison government. That will lose us seats in states like Western Australia and Queensland. We cannot afford to be losing seats. We've got to be going forward. So the substance of this policy debate is very important. The comparison with the Nationals, we've got people who have quit the party room, who've ratted on their colleagues, nominated in a ballot against their own colleagues, and Barnaby Joyce, like, we're talking quantumly different problems here.
That's true, isn't it, Michael? They are at a different scale. We had a Nat defect still within the LNP umbrella, but then there's a lot of talk in Parliament this week, whispers at least, about others going into an LNP party room away from the Nats.
Yeah. Well, look, that's right. We've had another bad week, and quite frankly, 20 people are having a meeting, which, for the reasons I said, I don't think is a negative for Labor long term, against what's happened on our side, which is a leadership challenge, a couple of cabinet ministers losing their jobs, a defection from the National Party in Canberra, an unpredicted outcome of the Deputy Speaker's role, etc., etc. We've had a worse week than Labor, clearly, and you'd be silly to deny that. But with 8 of 21 members from Queensland sitting in the National Party room, any resignations would be very significant. And I must say, I don't think that's going to happen. I certainly hope it doesn't happen. The stability of the National Party over generations has been one of their greatest hallmarks through all the years of McEwen and Anthony and onwards. They've been a pretty stable unit, and let's hope that stability returns, because they're an integral part of the coalition. They always will be. And if any members were to effectively resign from the coalition in Canberra and then just be members of the LNP in Queensland, I'm not sure how it would actually work constitutionally. That would create very considerable problems for the government.
But the Queensland LNP have been meeting as a separate group because there's so many. They've got one of the largest blocks, if not the largest block of voters in the Parliament, are those Queensland Liberal National Party people. So this is a significant block of votes that there's a time bomb blowing up in.
Mm.
And Stephen, as you look, you reflected on the Labor challenge, and absolutely they've got to get that message right. One, with a bit more clarity than they had at the last election. What about the government as you see the challenge right now? Because that's one component, that's the Nationals, but they do have moderates, not the least of which were at least representing seats that the climate change issue resonates very strongly. And you're talking about the seats like Kooyong and Higgins. Kooyong held by the Treasurer, Josh Frydenberg.
Absolutely. Look, what this distraction does for Scott Morrison is he's got Barnaby using climate change and coal as a weapon to attack McCormack. I mean, and then you've got Liberals having to react to it in the seats you've just described. Scott Morrison is actually well placed to improve, and he's saying this, we're going to improve our efforts on the climate change front. You'll notice he won't use the words climate change, but he intends to comply with probably Paris, not use the offsets that he's allowed to use, and then he'll say, I've done everything that you could possibly have said that I should do, and move on. But by having these distractions of Barnaby Joyce and forcing the moderate Liberals into a war on either side of him, they're detracting from his ability to sell his message. And I don't think he's as badly placed as many of the others do. I mean, we've had the bushfires, we've had the reaction, but I think Morrison is now very laser-like focused on putting in place measures that will allow him to say he's met the Paris agreements and not used. And there's the real challenge for Labor. What do we do in that circumstances? How do we go forward with a sensible policy that isn't going to be scorched earth for many of our sectors across the country?
It certainly looks like that. I absolutely agree with it, Stephen, that they're heading in that direction, that they won't use those Kyoto credits is where they're heading. And with that, Michael, comes a credibility on climate change on an international basis. Mr Morrison doesn't want to make a big deal of that, of course, in terms of the domestic debate in his own rebels on the right, like the Nats. But that's the fact, and he can take that to the international talks. It gives him credibility on that front.
Sure, of course, if you can get to your target by 2030 without using them, that's a big advantage, and that's still a long way away. But of course, from a political point of view, within the international community, despite the fact that others might be using them, that's going to give us a lot of leverage. But of course, Australia's not like most other countries. Most other countries in the developed world don't have the mining sector that we have here. don't have countries reliance on our coal like India and China. And it's all very well for people to say, oh, in Britain they don't have this debate about climate change. No, they don't have a mining industry for a start. So that's the one critical thing that you know, Kieran, that tends to be missing from this debate, quite frankly.
That's true, obviously differences in the economy, but as we head to the climate talks at the end of the year, they're hosted by Boris Johnson. He will want some substantive agreement, won't he, Michael? So that's not coming from some leftist like Corbyn or something. This is from the Tory leader.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But again, it's easy for him to say that. I mean, he's got a zero emission target by 2050. Climate change was a zero issue in the British election. Zero, none. There was no argument over climate change in the British election, which was about the things we know that was about without having to